The courthouse stood tall and intimidating against the morning sky. Its stone steps had been walked by thousands seeking justice, but today they carried the eager footsteps of Alex Thompson, a 17-year-old boy from the South Side with dreams bigger than most adults could imagine. "Remember to stand straight and speak clearly," his teacher Ms. Rivera whispered as their high school group entered the building. "Judge Harrison doesn't like mumbling." Alex nodded, straightening his borrowed tie. Unlike his classmates who saw this law shadowing program as just another field trip, Alex had stayed up until 2 a.m. studying the cases on today's docket. This wasn't just an excursion for him, it was a glimpse into his future. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and anxiety. As the students filed into the back rows, Alex noticed how Judge Harrison's eyes narrowed slightly when their group entered. The judge was in his 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses that he used more for looking down at people than for actually reading. "Court is in session," the bailiff announced, and the room fell silent. For the first hour, Alex watched intently, taking notes in his one notebook while his classmates fidgeted beside him. His pen moved rapidly across the page as he documented procedural steps, legal citations, and the judge's reasoning. When Judge Harrison called for a brief recess, Ms. Rivera encouraged the students to ask questions. Most hands stayed down, but Alex's shot up immediately. "Yes, young man in the back," Judge Harrison said with a hint of impatience. Alex stood, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Your Honor, I noticed that in the last case, the prosecution cited State v. Williams as precedent, but wouldn't the ruling in Parker v. County be more applicable since it specifically addresses juveniles?" A cold silence fell over the courtroom. Several attorneys turned to look at the teenager who had just questioned a judge's handling of case law. Judge Harrison removed his glasses slowly, his face hardening. "And where exactly did you get your law degree, son?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I don't have one yet, sir," Alex replied, feeling his cheeks burn. "I just read about the Parker case in." "Perhaps you should stick to your school books," Judge Harrison interrupted with a dismissive wave. "Or basketball. I hear that's popular in your neighborhood." Laughter rippled through the courtroom, not from the students, but from several attorneys and court staff. Alex felt his throat tighten as he slowly sat down, the judge's implications hanging in the air like a bad smell. Ms. Rivera placed a supportive hand on his shoulder, her eyes flashing with anger at the judge's comment. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered. But the damage was done. For the remainder of the session, Judge Harrison pointedly avoided calling on any of the students for questions. When another attorney cited the very same Parker case 10 minutes later, the judge nodded approvingly and called it excellent legal thinking. On the bus ride home, while other students chatted and laughed, Alex stared out the window, his reflection showing eyes that had lost their earlier excitement but gained something else: determination. That evening, at the small kitchen table in his apartment, Alex's mother found him surrounded by law books borrowed from the public library. "Rough day?" she asked, setting down a plate of dinner beside his elbow. Alex looked up, his eyes tired but resolute. "Judge Harrison thinks kids like me belong on basketball courts, not in courtrooms." His mother sat down across from him, her nurse's uniform still on from her double shift. "And what do you think?" "I think," Alex said, turning a page in his constitutional law textbook, "that one day I'm going to be back in his courtroom, and next time he won't be laughing." What neither of them knew was just how soon that day would come. Few people knew the truth about Alex Thompson. Behind his quiet demeanor and second-hand clothes was a mind that professors at Northwestern University called once in a generation. Morning light streamed through the blinds of their small apartment as Alex's mother, Diana, gently shook him awake. "It's 5:30, honey. Big day today." Alex groaned but quickly got up. Most teenagers would complain about such an early wake-up, but he had a college lecture at 8 a.m., followed by 3 more classes, and then his special law program at 4 p.m. At just 17, he was juggling what would break most adults. "I made you breakfast," Diana said, already in her nurse's scrubs for her morning shift at the hospital. Dark circles under her eyes revealed she had worked late last night too. "Mom, you didn't have to," Alex said, feeling guilty as he saw the eggs and toast waiting on their small kitchen table. "You need sleep more than I need fancy breakfast." Diana smiled tiredly. "It's not fancy, it's fuel. Your brain needs it." She ruffled his hair. Besides, it's not every day my son gets to attend Professor Chen's constitutional law seminar. Not bad for someone who's technically still in high school. What Diana didn't mention was the second job she'd taken cleaning offices at night, or how she'd pawned her mother's wedding ring last month to pay for Alex's special textbooks. Some sacrifices didn't need to be talked about. At Northwestern, Alex slipped into the back of the lecture hall, his age making him stand out among the graduate students. He'd graduated high school at 15, but still looked young enough that security sometimes stopped him, thinking he was lost. Thompson, Professor Chen called out as students filed in. "I'm read your paper on juvenile rights in the court system. Fascinating perspective. See me after class." A few students glanced back, some with respect, others with irritation. Being singled out for praise was a double-edged sword when you were younger than everyone by at least 4 years. After class, Professor Chen didn't waste time with small talk. "You should be preparing for law school applications already," she said, organizing papers on her desk. "Your understanding of case law is better than most of my second-year law students." "That's the plan," Alex replied, shifting uncomfortably. "But money," Professor Chen nodded, understanding immediately. "There are scholarships, with your grades and test scores. And my background," Alex added quietly. Professor Chen's eyes softened. "Yes, that too. Universities want diversity of thought and experience. You bring both." She hesitated, then pulled a folder from her desk. "There's a special program starting next semester. First-year law courses alongside undergraduate studies. It's highly competitive." Alex's heart raced. "How competitive?" "They're taking 5 students from across the country," she said. "The application is due in 3 weeks." That night, after his mother fell asleep on the couch waiting for him to finish studying, Alex gently covered her with a blanket. On the coffee table lay a stack of bills marked "Final Notice" and a letter from the building manager about their late rent. Alex quietly moved to their small kitchen table where his laptop hummed, the screen showing his half-completed application. The personal essay question stared back at him. "Describe a challenge you faced and how it has prepared you for a career in law." His mind flashed to Judge Harrison's smirking face, the courthouse laughter still ringing in his ears. He began to type. 3 weeks later, Professor Chen called him into her office, her usually serious face breaking into a rare smile. "You got in," she said simply. "And they're offering a full scholarship." Alex stood frozen, unable to speak. "You earned this," she continued, her voice firm. "Your essay about that judge, about being dismissed and stereotyped in the courtroom, it was powerful. The committee said it was the most compelling personal statement they'd read in years." As Alex walked home that evening, his phone heavy in his pocket with the news he couldn't wait to share with his mother, he had no idea that in just a few months, his path would cross again with Judge Harrison in a way neither of them could have imagined. 6 months into his special law program, Alex had settled into a grueling routine. His day started before sunrise and ended long after sunset, splitting time between undergraduate classes and first-year law courses. Despite the punishing schedule, he thrived, quickly becoming a favorite among professors who were initially skeptical of the kid in their classrooms. One rainy Tuesday, Alex rushed into the law clinic office, soaking wet and 10 minutes late for his volunteer shift. "Sorry, he began, then stopped when he saw the chaos. Papers were scattered everywhere, phones ringing off the hook, and the clinic director, Mr. Parker, looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Thompson, thank goodness," Mr. Parker said, waving him over. "We've got a situation." The situation had a name. Anthony Rivera, a 16-year-old high school student accused of stealing electronics from a downtown store. The evidence was flimsy at best, security footage too grainy to identify anyone clearly, and a witness whose statement kept changing. But the prosecutor was pushing hard to try Anthony as an adult, which would mean potentially years in prison instead of juvenile rehabilitation. "Where's Ms. Wilson?" Alex asked, referring to the attorney who usually handled juvenile cases. Mr. Parker ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Hospital. Appendicitis. She'll be out for at least 2 weeks." "But the hearing is in 3 days," Alex said, scanning the case file Mr. Parker had handed him. "Exactly our problem. Everyone else is overloaded." Mr. Parker hesitated, then said what Alex could tell he'd been thinking. You've shown remarkable understanding of juvenile defense law in your coursework. Professor Chen speaks highly of your research abilities. Alex felt his heart race. Are you asking me to? To assist, Mr. Parker clarified quickly. Obviously, you can't represent him alone. I'll be lead counsel. But we need your brain on this, especially your knowledge of precedent cases. That night, Alex didn't sleep. Instead, he pored over every detail of Anthony's case, making notes until his fingers cramped. The boy's family had immigrated 5 years ago. His mother worked as a hotel housekeeper, his father as a delivery driver. Anthony had no prior record, volunteered at his church, and had a college scholarship already lined up. By morning, Alex had filled a notebook with potential arguments and precedent cases. He met with Anthony that afternoon, listening carefully as the teenager, voice shaking slightly, explained he'd been nowhere near the store on the day of the theft. I swear I was at my cousin's birthday party, Anthony said, his eyes pleading. There are photos. We'll find them, Alex promised. And anything else that helps prove your innocence. For the next 2 days, Alex barely left the clinic. He tracked down the party photos, interviewed Anthony's teachers, and built a timeline proving the impossibility of Anthony being at the store during the theft. Mr. Parker watched with growing amazement as the case file grew stronger. You've done incredible work, Mr. Parker said on the eve of the hearing. I think we're ready to. The office phone rang, interrupting him. Alex watched as Mr. Parker's face fell while listening to the caller. That was the court clerk, he said after hanging up. They've reassigned our case to a different courtroom. Judge Harrison will be presiding. The color drained from Alex's face. Harrison? William Harrison. Mr. Parker nodded. You know him? Alex's mind flashed back to the humiliation 6 months earlier. The laughter. The dismissal. The suggestion that he stick to basketball. We've met, he said quietly. Later that night, alone in his room, Alex nearly called Mr. Parker to remove himself from the case. Judge Harrison clearly didn't respect him, might even harbor biases that could hurt Anthony's chances. But as he reached for his phone, his eyes fell on a photo he pinned to his wall, the high school law club, taken the day before their courthouse visit. Everyone smiling, full of hope and possibilities. Alex put the phone down. Running away wouldn't help Anthony, and it wouldn't prove Judge Harrison wrong. Instead, he opened his laptop one more time and began searching for something so compelling, so legally sound, that even a prejudiced judge couldn't ignore it. Somewhere in the vast ocean of legal precedent, there had to be a lifeline for Anthony, and a chance for Alex to show Judge Harrison exactly who he was dealing with. The courthouse looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago, but Alex felt different walking up its stone steps this time. No longer just an observer, today he entered as part of Anthony's defense team. Nervous? Mr. Parker asked, noticing Alex's tight grip on his briefcase. No, Alex lied, adjusting his tie, his own this time, not borrowed. The hallway outside courtroom 4C buzzed with activity. Lawyers chatted in hushed tones while clients waited anxiously on benches. Alex spotted Anthony sitting with his parents, the boy's shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear. The evidence folder, Mr. Parker said suddenly, patting his pockets. I think I left it in the car. Wait here with Anthony. I'll be right back. Left alone, Alex sat beside Anthony, whose leg bounced with nervous energy. What if they don't believe me? Anthony whispered. Alex looked at the boy who, despite being only a year younger than himself, seemed so much more vulnerable. They will. We have the photos proving you were at the party, your cousin's statement, and... The courtroom doors opened, cutting him off. People began filing in, including a sharp-dressed woman Alex recognized as the prosecutor, Ms. Bell. Known for her high conviction rate, she barely glanced at them as she passed. All rise. The bailiff called minutes later. The room fell silent as Judge Harrison entered, his black robe flowing behind him. Alex held his breath as the judge took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and looked down at the day's docket. First case, State versus Anthony Rivera, Judge Harrison announced. His eyes scanned the courtroom, landing first on Anthony, then shifting to the defense table where Alex stood alongside the empty chair that should have held Mr. Parker. The recognition was instant. Judge Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly, and his mouth twitched before settling into a frown. And you are? He asked, though his tone suggested he remembered exactly who Alex was. Alex Thompson, Your Honor. I'm assisting on Anthony Rivera's defense. Assisting, Judge Harrison repeated, emphasizing the word. And where is lead counsel? As if on cue, the courtroom doors burst open and Mr. Parker rushed in, slightly out of breath. My apologies, Your Honor. Car trouble. Judge Harrison's frown deepened. Let's not waste any more time. Ms. Bell, your opening statement. The preliminary hearing proceeded with excruciating slowness. Every time Alex tried to speak or passed research notes to Mr. Parker, Judge Harrison found a reason to interrupt or object to his participation. Mr. Parker, the judge said during a discussion of evidence, perhaps your young assistant should focus on taking notes rather than attempting to argue points of law. Mr. Parker looked uncomfortable but stood his ground. Your Honor, Alex has done excellent research on precedent cases relevant to juvenile defendants. If I may, we'd like to present. We're not here for a law school demonstration, Judge Harrison cut in. This is a real courtroom with real consequences. During the lunch break, Mr. Parker pulled Alex aside in the hallway. That was rough in there. Maybe you should step back and just help me prepare behind the scenes. Harrison clearly has some kind of issue with you. Alex watched Anthony and his parents huddled on a bench nearby, their faces drawn with worry. If I step back, what message does that send? That I couldn't handle it. That he was right about me. This isn't about you, Mr. Parker said gently. It's about what's best for Anthony. Alex nodded slowly. Exactly. And what's best for Anthony is using every legal argument we have. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and opened it to reveal dozens of pages of neatly organized research. Last night, I found something. A precedent case from 1987 that's practically identical to Anthony's situation. The judge ruled that without clear visual identification and with an alibi supported by multiple witnesses, there weren't grounds to try the defendant as an adult. Mr. Parker scanned the papers, his eyes widening. This is incredibly thorough. Why didn't this case come up in our database search? Because it was in a different jurisdiction and later overshadowed by a bigger case, Alex explained. But it was never overturned. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Harrison seemed determined to rush through the remainder of the hearing. But as Ms. Bell pushed for Anthony to be tried as an adult, Mr. Parker signaled to Alex. Their moment had come. The courthouse looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago, but Alex felt different walking up its stone steps this time. No longer just an observer, today he entered as part of Anthony's defense team. Nervous? Mr. Parker asked, noticing Alex's tight grip on his briefcase. No, Alex lied, adjusting his tie, his own this time, not borrowed. The hallway outside courtroom 4C buzzed with activity. Lawyers chatted in hushed tones while clients waited anxiously on benches. Alex spotted Anthony sitting with his parents, the boy's shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear. The evidence folder, Mr. Parker said suddenly, patting his pockets. I think I left it in the car. Wait here with Anthony. I'll be right back. Left alone, Alex sat beside Anthony, whose leg bounced with nervous energy. What if they don't believe me? Anthony whispered. Alex looked at the boy who, despite being only a year younger than himself, seemed so much more vulnerable. They will. We have the photos proving you were at the party, your cousin's statement and... The courtroom doors opened, cutting him off. People began filing in, including a sharp-dressed woman Alex recognized as the prosecutor, Ms. Bell. Known for her high conviction rate, she barely glanced at them as she passed. All rise. The bailiff called minutes later. The room fell silent as Judge Harrison entered, his black robe flowing behind him. Alex held his breath as the judge took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and looked down at the day's docket. First case, State versus Anthony Rivera, Judge Harrison announced. His eyes scanned the courtroom, landing first on Anthony, then shifting to the defense table where Alex stood alongside the empty chair that should have held Mr. Parker. The recognition was instant. Judge Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly, and his mouth twitched before settling into a frown. And you are? He asked, though his tone suggested he remembered exactly who Alex was. Alex Thompson, Your Honor. I'm assisting on Anthony Rivera's defense. Assisting? Judge Harrison repeated, emphasizing the word. And where is lead counsel? As if on cue, the courtroom doors burst open and Mr. Parker rushed in, slightly out of breath. My apologies, Your Honor. Car trouble. Judge Harrison's frown deepened. Let's not waste any more time. Ms. Bell, your opening statement. The preliminary hearing proceeded with excruciating slowness. Every time Alex tried to speak or passed research notes to Mr. Parker, Judge Harrison found a reason to interrupt or object to his participation. Mr. Parker, the judge said during a discussion of evidence, perhaps your young assistant should focus on taking notes rather than attempting to argue points of law. Mr. Parker looked uncomfortable but stood his ground. Your Honor, Alex has done excellent research on precedent cases relevant to juvenile defendants. If I may, we'd like to present. We're not here for a law school demonstration, Judge Harrison cut in. This is a real courtroom with real consequences. During the lunch break, Mr. Parker pulled Alex aside in the hallway. That was rough in there. Maybe you should step back and just help me prepare behind the scenes. Harrison clearly has some kind of issue with you. Alex watched Anthony and his parents huddled on a bench nearby, their faces drawn with worry. If I step back, what message does that send? That I couldn't handle it. That he was right about me. This isn't about you, Mr. Parker said gently. It's about what's best for Anthony. Alex nodded slowly. Exactly. And what's best for Anthony is using every legal argument we have. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and opened it to reveal dozens of pages of neatly organized research. Last night, I found something. A precedent case from 1987 that's practically identical to Anthony's situation. The judge ruled that without clear visual identification and with an alibi supported by multiple witnesses, there weren't grounds to try the defendant as an adult. Mr. Parker scanned the papers, his eyes widening. This is incredibly thorough. Why didn't this case come up in our database search? Because it was in a different jurisdiction and later overshadowed by a bigger case, Alex explained. But it was never overturned. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Harrison seemed determined to rush through the remainder of the hearing. But as Ms. Bell pushed for Anthony to be tried as an adult, Mr. Parker signaled to Alex. Their moment had come. The afternoon session was about to begin when Mr. Parker suddenly doubled over, his face turning pale. Are you okay? Alex whispered as people filed back into the courtroom. No, Mr. Parker groaned, clutching his stomach. That sandwich from the cafeteria, I think it's food poisoning. Alex felt a wave of panic. Should we ask for a delay? No time, Mr. Parker said through gritted teeth. This is Anthony's only chance before they decide whether to try him as an adult. You'll have to present the motion. Me, but I'm not. You know the case better than anyone, Mr. Parker interrupted, then rushed from the courtroom, leaving Alex standing alone at the defense table. Anthony leaned forward anxiously. What's happening? Where's he going? Before Alex could answer, the bailiff's voice boomed. All rise for the Honorable Judge William Harrison. Judge Harrison entered, his eyes immediately noticing Mr. Parker's absence. Where is lead counsel for the defense? Alex stood, knees shaking slightly but voice steady. Mr. Parker has fallen ill, Your Honor. He asked me to continue in his absence. A smirk formed on Judge Harrison's face. Did he now? And you believe you're qualified to represent the defendant? Under supervision, yes, Alex replied. And the law allows for it in these circumstances. The judge leaned back, making no effort to hide his amusement. Very well. This should be educational for everyone. Proceed with your motion, Mr. Thompson. The prosecutor, Ms. Bell, looked equally amused, shuffling her papers with confident movements. She clearly thought this would be quick and easy. Alex took a deep breath and stepped forward. 6 months of double college courses, countless nights studying case law, and the memory of being laughed at in this very courtroom, all of it had led to this moment. Your Honor, the defense moves that Anthony Rivera's case remain in juvenile court rather than being transferred to adult criminal court. Judge Harrison nodded dismissively. On what grounds? 3 grounds, Your Honor, Alex began, his voice growing stronger with each word. First, the identification evidence is insufficient. The security footage is too grainy to positively identify anyone, and the witness descriptions are inconsistent. He pulled out his carefully prepared exhibits, displaying side-by-side comparisons of the security footage with Anthony's school photo. The differences were obvious when pointed out. Second, Anthony has a solid alibi. He was at his cousin's birthday party at the time of the theft, as confirmed by these time-stamped photos and statements from 5 witnesses. Judge Harrison frowned, studying the evidence more closely than before. And third, Alex continued, there is clear precedent. In the case of State v. Rodriguez, 1987, the circumstances were nearly identical. A 16-year-old defendant with no prior record, grainy security footage, and a solid alibi. The court ruled that. I'm familiar with Rodriguez, Judge Harrison interrupted, his tone sharp. That case was in another jurisdiction. But it was later cited in our jurisdiction, Your Honor, Alex responded without missing a beat. In Lee v. State, 1992, and again in Henderson v. State, 1998. The principle that juvenile defendants cannot be transferred to adult court without clear, convincing evidence has been consistently upheld. The courtroom fell silent. Even Ms. Bell looked surprised. Furthermore, Alex continued, pulling out more documents. The Supreme Court has consistently emphasized the importance of rehabilitation for juvenile offenders, most recently in Montgomery v. Louisiana, where they noted that children are constitutionally different from adults for purposes of sentencing. For the next 20 minutes, Alex presented a flawless legal argument, citing cases that even veteran attorneys in the room were scribbling down. When Ms. Bell attempted to interrupt with an objection, Alex respectfully but firmly countered with yet another precedent that rendered her argument moot. Judge Harrison's expression had transformed from amusement to disbelief to reluctant respect. He asked difficult questions, trying to poke holes in Alex's reasoning, but for each challenge, the young man had a thoughtful, well-researched response. In the gallery, Anthony's parents watched with growing hope. Court reporters who had seen thousands of arguments exchanged impressed glances. And in the back of the courtroom, Professor Chen had quietly entered, a proud smile on her face as she watched her student shine. When Alex finally finished, the courtroom remained silent for several long seconds. Judge Harrison removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The court will take a 30-minute recess to consider the arguments, he announced, his voice notably lacking its earlier condescension. As he stood to leave, he paused, giving Alex a long, measuring look before disappearing into his chambers. Only then did Alex realize he'd been holding his breath. Judge Harrison sat alone in his chambers, the case file open before him. He ran a hand through his silver hair, his mind replaying the astonishing legal argument he'd just witnessed from a teenager who wasn't even old enough to vote. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. His clerk, David, entered with a stack of papers. "You asked for background on the Thompson kid?" "Yes." Judge Harrison took the papers, scanning the first page. "Did you find anything interesting?" "Interesting doesn't begin to cover it, sir." David leaned against the wall. He graduated high school at 15, perfect SAT scores. Currently enrolled in a special dual program at Northwestern, undergraduate and law courses simultaneously. Harrison flipped through the pages with growing amazement. Academic awards. Published articles in legal journals. A perfect LSAT score, though he hadn't officially applied to law school yet. And get this, David continued. His mother works double shifts as a nurse to support him. Father died when he was 8. They live in an apartment on the south side. He takes 3 buses every morning to get to Northwestern. Judge Harrison sat back in his chair, a familiar discomfort settling in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had 6 months ago when he dismissed the boy in his courtroom, assuming he was just another kid on a field trip, probably from a troubled school where legal aspirations seemed unrealistic. "There's more," David said, pointing to one of the papers. "That precedent case he cited, Rodriguez? Most lawyers don't even know about it. It's not in the main databases. He must have dug through actual physical archives to find it." Harrison stared at the wall, where framed photos showed his own journey through law school at Yale, his clerkship, his appointment to the bench. Every step of the way, doors had opened for him. Doors that remained firmly closed for kids like Alex Thompson. "Sir," David prompted, "the recess is almost over." "Thank you, David." Harrison gathered the papers and slid them into his desk drawer. That will be all." After his clerk left, Harrison pulled open another drawer and removed an old, worn photograph. Himself at 17, standing proudly in front of his parents' suburban home. His father, also a judge, had his hand on young William's shoulder. The path had been so clear, so assured. What would his own life have looked like if he'd been born in Alex's circumstances? Back in the courtroom, people rose as Judge Harrison returned to the bench. His eyes immediately found Alex, who stood tall despite the visible tension in his shoulders. "Before I rule on the motion," Harrison began, his voice different than before, "I'd like to address something." The courtroom fell silent. In my 30 years on the bench, I've seen thousands of attorneys present arguments before me. Some good, some mediocre, some who clearly didn't prepare. He paused, looking directly at Alex. "What I witnessed today from Mr. Thompson was exceptional by any standard." Alex's eyes widened slightly. "The defense's motion is granted," Harrison continued. "Anthony Rivera's case will remain in juvenile court." Relief washed over Anthony's face as his parents embraced behind him. The prosecutor, Ms. Bell, pressed her lips together in disappointment. Furthermore, Judge Harrison added, "Given the weakness of the evidence presented by the prosecution and the strength of the alibi defense, I'm recommending a complete review of this case before it proceeds any further." As the courtroom began to empty, Harrison made an unusual request. "Mr. Thompson, a word in my chambers, please." 5 minutes later, Alex stood awkwardly in the judge's office, unsure why he'd been summoned. "You don't remember me, do you?" Alex finally said, breaking the silence. "From 6 months ago." "I remember." Harrison sat behind his desk. "I dismissed you. Made assumptions about your abilities based on your age, your background." He hesitated. "Your race." Alex remained silent. "I was wrong," Harrison said simply. "And I'm not often wrong, Mr. Thompson." He opened a drawer and removed a business card, sliding it across the desk. "A colleague of mine at the county prosecutor's office runs an internship program for exceptional law students. The application deadline was last week, but I've spoken to him. There's still a spot available." Alex picked up the card, stunned. "It would be a waste of remarkable talent if you didn't apply," Harrison added. "And we have enough waste in our legal system already." As Alex left the chambers, his mind raced with possibilities. In the courthouse hallway, he found Anthony and his parents waiting. "Thank you," Anthony's mother said, tears in her eyes. "You saved my son's future." What none of them realized was that inside his chambers, Judge Harrison was making a phone call that would change not just Alex's future, but the culture of his entire courthouse. 6 years passed like turning pages in a book. Chapters closed and new ones began. Lives changed in ways no one could have predicted on that fateful day in Judge Harrison's courtroom. On a bright Monday morning, the courthouse bustled with its usual activity. Lawyers hurried up and down the marble hallways, clients waited nervously on benches, and court officers directed traffic with practiced efficiency. In courtroom 4C, Judge Harrison's courtroom, people were filing in for the day's first case. The judge himself had changed over the years. His hair was wider and glasses a bit thicker, but the most noticeable difference was in his demeanor. The harsh edges had softened, replaced by a reputation for fairness that had earned him respect from defense attorneys and prosecutors alike. A young woman rushed in, taking a seat in the back row just as the bailiff called out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge William Harrison." After the judge took his seat, he nodded toward the prosecution table. "I understand we have a new assistant district attorney joining us today." A tall man in a crisp navy suit stood. At 23, he was the youngest assistant DA in the city's history. His appointment had made headlines, not just because of his age, but because of his extraordinary record at law school and his commitment to reforming juvenile justice. "Yes, Your Honor." "Alex Thompson for the state." Judge Harrison smiled slightly. "Welcome, Mr. Thompson, or should I say, welcome back." 6 years had transformed Alex from a determined teenager into a poised young attorney. His mother Diana sat in the front row, wearing her best dress, pride shining in her eyes. Beside her sat Professor Chen, who had become a mentor and friend. And on Diana's other side was Anthony Rivera, now a college student studying criminal justice, inspired by the young man who had saved him from an adult conviction years ago. The state is ready to proceed, Your Honor, Alex said, his voice confident but not arrogant. The case being heard that day involved a 17-year-old girl accused of shoplifting. Under the old system, she might have faced charges that would follow her for life. But things had changed in Judge Harrison's courtroom and throughout the juvenile justice system in their city. As Alex presented the state's case, he did something unusual for a prosecutor. He outlined not just the evidence against the girl, but also the circumstances that had led to her actions: a homeless mother, younger siblings to feed, and schools that had failed to notice her struggles. The state recommends devotion to the New Beginnings program, Alex concluded. This is a case where punishment would only create more harm. This young woman needs support, not a criminal record. Judge Harrison nodded approvingly. The court agrees. Case diverted to New Beginnings. He looked at the girl, who was staring in disbelief at the second chance she'd just received. Don't waste this opportunity. After court adjourned, Judge Harrison motioned for Alex to join him in his chambers. The room looked much the same as it had 6 years earlier, but new photos had joined the old ones. Among them was a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Local Judge Launches Youth Legal Education Program in Underserved Communities." "Your first case as prosecutor went well," Harrison said, settling into his chair. "Thank you, sir," Alex replied. "Though I know some people are surprised I chose this path instead of defense." Harrison smiled. "Change happens from within. I've learned that lesson myself." Alex nodded toward the photo of the youth program. "That program made a difference for dozens of kids from my old neighborhood. 3 are in law school now." "Your recommendation inspired it," Harrison admitted. "That day, after your argument for Anthony, I realized how many talented young people never get the chance to develop their gifts, all because people like me see them through the lens of prejudice instead of potential." A comfortable silence fell between them, two men from different generations and backgrounds who had changed each other's lives and, in doing so, begun to change the system itself. "I have a meeting with the chief judge this afternoon," Harrison said finally. "We're discussing expanding the youth devotion program countywide. I'd like you to join us. Your perspective would be valuable." As Alex left the courthouse that afternoon, he paused on the same stone steps where, as a 17-year-old, he had first entered with dreams, but little certainty they would ever come true. The building looked smaller now, less intimidating. He had conquered its challenges and, alongside an unlikely ally, begun transforming it from within. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "So proud of you today. Your father would be too." Alex smiled, tucking the phone away as he descended the steps toward whatever challenges awaited next. Behind him, the courthouse doors opened again as Judge Harrison emerged, nodding respectfully to the young man who had taught an old judge his most important lesson in 30 years on the bench.